This is Black Market Leadership, the underground resource for disruptors and status quo breakers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Mission Command series. And of course, we have the expert Donald Vandergrift, author of Adopting Mission Command. And today, our guest is Fred Leland, retired lieutenant, 20 years in the police force. Is that correct, Fred?
It's 30 years.
Well, sorry, I undercut you by
right.
10 years. And you're a former Marine. So
yes.
So this is going to be a fascinating discussion because, as the audience knows, we're looking at Mission Command and hitting it from different perspectives, different directions, or different areas. And today is law enforcement. So the big question I think everyone, at least I know I have in my mind, is I have no connection to law enforcement. In fact, I always say I have a special relationship. I stay away from them and they stay away from me. So,
I love it.
So how exactly, first of all, how do you take Mission Command, a military idea, I'm going to say doctrine, but a military idea, and put that into law enforcement? What is Mission Command to law enforcement? Is it the same thing that the Army uses and the Marine Corps uses? Walk us through this, Fred.
Yeah, it's well, first of all, thanks for having me in here. It's a privilege for me to be able to talk about this, and especially have Dawn in here with you. Because that's what I learned. All I know about this from Dawn. So anyway, but yeah, it's the same. In the first place, policing has adopted military ideas when it comes to leadership, when it comes to training and development, all these things over the years, and we've tweaked them. Obviously, different missions, and obviously, policing's at home is totally different than fighting warfare away. But so we've tweaked these things. But the big thing about what's interesting and actually I'll use the term amusing because it's amusing to me, is that in policing, for example, the top-down autocratic structures of organizations has been a big part of policing for decades, just like it was in the military and is and still in many locations. Yet in the 70s, when they started talking about community policing, neighborhood policing, problem-oriented policing, they started talking about how they needed the frontline personnel to be able to make decisions so that they could solve problems, be able to make sense of things. So sense-making, develop that, problem-solving, adapt. All these things were talked about, written about in books that are used in policing for learning, for studying, for promotional exams, studying in college. All talked about the decentralized approach to policing, which is the Mission Command side of it. Yet they got stuck, and still currently in most places are stuck in policing in the centralized approach, the top-down structure from the chief commissioner on down to the street cop. So there's a lot of talk in policing about decentralized control, but the talk, nobody or very few are walking the talk when it comes to it. And this is, in my view, was part of the reasons we're seeing some of these problems that we're seeing today, is because we've become, whenever there's trouble, if you will, or the focus of, in a negative way on policing comes, everybody kind of, instead of leading, they tend to shut down and wait for this thing to blow over. And there might be talk about this and talk about that, but then it goes back to the status quo. So Mission Command is powerful in police work because the frontline people, the cops on the street, if you train and develop them to a high level of professionalism, which is another problem we can talk about, because that's not happening in the vast majority of places. It's not happening. There are exceptions, but for the most part, it's basic training the street cop gets. And we can touch on that more. But if you train into a high level,
it's very rigid too. Let me cut in, Fred.
Yeah, go ahead.
The last priority in a police department is training. The money, they just don't see the value in it. Even though the lady that pulled the gun versus the teaser out in this case going on right now, I can assure you, Fred and I talked a lot about it. I can assure you that was because she had not gotten the right development. I use that word for training, the right development in her career. It's not her fault. It's her development was bad. Every time I hear the cops do this or that, the solution's right in front of them. I did a podcast with a bunch of chiefs 2 months ago, and they loved what I had to say. How many? That was like 24 chiefs. How many offers you think I had to come teach at their department? Zero. Even though they said I was like, wow, it was really, you could tell they were excited, but not one offer to come. And I don't kill them with money. I make enough to get by despite 30 years of research into this and experimentation and sacrifice, because I tee a lot of people off. But my point is this: the solution's right in front of us and we're not taking it. But these things that Fred's doing for COP, for example, and that we advocate with outcomes-based learning, they get it. And they remember, I pasted a tape that you saw by Dr. Bork and Elizabeth Bork, the two leading learnings, and Fred knows them. I introduced Fred to him. That's what OBL is based on too, the scientific side. You rearrange this stuff, make it problem solving, involve the student, and they get it, and they remember how to do it when they go out and actually do it. So what Fred's saying, that the solution's easy. They just have to be willing to spend some money, change the money from the horrible training they're doing now to what we do, and that's all they need to do. But they're not doing it.
And one of the reasons, and this is my opinion, is we've been taught, like when I went to instructor school 30 years ago, you were taught this rigid linear way of teaching, PowerPoint, or even in my day, I go back to before PowerPoint when you had mimeographed overheads, projectors. Right? So, and everything was taught linear. You just told everybody what to do. And a culture of that for all these decades, they hear what, like Don said, they hear it, especially the bosses. They like it. It sounds great. They can talk some of the jargon, but it takes work to implement it. You got to do it. And part of the problem is that's time. That's time and effort. And you got to be willing to develop your people in that way. In fact, Don and I, we wrote a book called the Adaptive Leadership Handbook, Innovative Ways to Teach and Develop Your People, which a big responsibility of leadership in the mission command culture is to train and develop your people. It's simple. It goes back through history. You can look at the Marine Corps. It was always about developing your guys, all right? Or that was a big part of it. In policing, there's talk of it. Highly trained police officers, like this lady with the taser, the officer with the taser Don mentioned. Yeah, some of that training is usually, okay, what do they need? They need to shoot 2 live tasers. And a big issue is, most of the time, and I don't know whether this lady was or not, but most trainings, the cop gets hit with a taser, so he knows what it feels like. And I've been in that scenario where I've been hit with it. So you actually get electrocuted to see how it feels. All right, but there's they want to talk about even process-based training. If that's all you understand, that's not even enough to develop what street action takes. So I agree with Dawn that it's not her fault. She was trained in a certain way. She's been drawing a gun from a holster for however long her career's been, over and over and over again, time after time after time. Stimulus response, stimulus response, stimulus response. Now they put a taser on, and I can easily see where she could draw that, especially with no problem solving training, no adaptability, and not even enough process-based training to develop the skill set. And that's the reality of what we're seeing in policing. I've been talking about this long before I retired. And the reality of it is if policing wants to hold their officers accountable, they got to do more than send them to the basic, get them through, what does it say? Two live taser shots and then multiple repetitions and an 8-hour class or whatever it is, and get them out. So it's all about just getting them through the classes, checking the box, right, and moving on. And that's nowhere near good enough when you got people patrolling the streets with all kinds of different tools now, right? They got all kinds of tools. They got to make decisions between a gun and the taser. If you look at the videos that have come out in these cases, especially with this lady, she's right on the ground saying, I drew the wrong weapon. I just killed him, right? It's clearly an accidental thing. Now, people who don't understand this, lay people, they sit there, how can that be? But training is key. When you understand training and development, you understand how that can happen.
It's a methodology. Something that I keep hearing is we need more training. No, you don't need more training, because I have a slide that I sent both of you earlier a few months ago The methodology is what it is. If you get more of the same training, you're going to get nothing better. I keep telling people that the methodology that most police forces use, the vast majority, is wrong, and they don't even understand. And what's really bad, as Fred alluded to, is of all the professions, even more so than the military, police need to be decentralized to effectively operate. Yet the way they develop their people is backwards to the way they want them to act or what they say about it. So exactly, that's what's sad. The solution's right in front of us. It's the OBL methodology proven by science and history. It just changed the methodology. And I did it with the Baltimore police from 2009 to 10, and they loved it. There was police sergeants that do the shifts. That's how they do their command. They do shift changes. They were doing TDGs, and the policemen, rank and file street cops loved it because they were participating, and they were talking about what they needed to do. One of the things they did was how to pull over a diplomatic license plate person, a diplomatic immunity. I got a call from Frederick Buford, the commissioner of Baltimore in 2010. Don, you saved my life. I said, what do you mean? He says, one of my cops pulled over a diplomatic immunity that was a DUI and knew how to act and handle it because they did a TDG on it the week before. And we had never talked about that in the development or anything. It's in the regs, but no one had ever mentioned it because it never happened. It just happened. They did a TDG on it the week before, and it made us look good how he handled this situation with this ambassador or whatever. So the problem is methodology and facilitation. Fred's really gotten good at that, adapting it to police work. But like I said, the answer is right in front of them. But all I hear on TV is they need more training. No, they don't need more training. They need a different methodology because the one they're using right now is bad.
I agree with you, Dawn, 100%. It's not about more. It's about how we teach. It's about how we develop them. Because, like, for example, we'll stay on this taser. It's all process driven. Here's what we got to do. You got to do this. You got to get hit with it, so you feel it. You're going to be able to. We're going to talk to you about nomenclature, and we're going to let you shoot a few rounds out of it, and that's it. No scenario based work. No engagement, right? With a force on force adversary, so that you have to draw in under pressure of making decisions. The right weapon, the right tool. You can use simunitions or whatever for your handgun, and use the taser for what it is. There's none of that. It's just process based. And if you teach stimulus response training, right, which is what we call it in police work, process based, it's all stimulus. It's a gun, pull the trigger, knife, pull the trigger, this, whatever it is, right, on and on and on. What are you going to get on the street, right? You're going to get stimulus response, right? And there's not any thinking. Now, when you talk to them, well, that isn't what we're, yeah, but you're not teaching them to think. You're not teaching them to sense make. You're not teaching them to frame and solve problems. You're not teaching them to be adaptable. You tell them to do it this way. On paper, you'll say this procedure is just a guideline. But if he varies from the guideline, then there's 600 questions about why did you vary? Why didn't you follow the rules? So there's a whole system of training. There's a system of leadership, of too much focus on policies and procedures, which in my experience is all about risk aversion, trying to protect the organization from liability, which I get. But at the same time, if we're so risk averse versus being risk savvy, there's risk involved. You can't take it out of crisis scenarios, right? It's amazing to me how we think that we can come up with a best practice for everything, even before it happens. Right? It's great for a technical problem, how to process a crime scene. Okay, I can have a checklist for that. It makes sense. Exactly. But if it's an adaptive challenge, right, where we don't even know what the hell is going on until we get there, but yet we think like an active shooter, we can have a plan in place that's going to be laid out perfectly and operationally, and it just doesn't work that way. There's too many unknowns and uncertainties involved, and we're not teaching guys how to make these decisions under the types of pressure. Now they'll all take. We've been doing this is exactly what you'll hear. We've been doing simulations training for years. Well, how many times I do informal polls with cops, and I teach hundreds, thousands a year, right? And I ask them, how many guys have done simulations training? Every hand will go up. I go, how many guys have done it 5 times? Half the hands go down, right? How many guys have done it 10 times? 1 or 2 hands. How do you get good at doing this if you hardly ever train? You don't get a direct experience very often. Shootings and using your weapon in the field, even use of force is only about use of physical force is about 1.4% of all police contacts yearly, annually. It's been that way since I've been on this job. It's in and about that number, 1.4%. Deadly force nationwide is always in and around 0.0002%. That's how often cops use it, or how rarely they use it, is what I should say. So where are they getting direct experience? They're not. They have to get it through training and development. If all it is go to the range and shoot at a target that don't shoot back, that's qualification. I'm fine with that. But if you want to teach cops how to think under pressure, they've got to be involved in force-on-force scenario-based work, where they engage and they're not always shooting. They're talking people out of things. They're maneuvering. They're taking advantages. They're using tactics. All that. Everything's taught in silos. If you want to get tactical training, you go to a tactical training school. If you want to get law training, you obviously go to legal. If you want to get criminal procedure, you go to criminal procedure. Tasers separate, batons separate, defensive tactics separate. We got to blend these things. We got to and make it tougher so that guys are making decisions under the same types of pressures they're going to see on the street. And that's, in my view, was a big piece of mission command. Like Don said, Baltimore, I started doing TDGs, and I mentioned this earlier before we went recorded. When I found Don online, but when I first met him in person down in remember this meeting, Don, down in Greenville, South Carolina, where you taught with Chet Richards, and I brought all my laminated Don Vandergrift stuff, right? And I said, hey, Don, look this is what we're doing. And Don's looking at it. And so I've been doing this, but this is going on. That was 2008. I started doing it like 2004 when I found Raising the Bar, Don's book, and started looking at how to do it, thinking I was learning. I'm trying to learn it on my own. So, and I'll never forget, I showed Don all the stuff I was using, his articles, and I said, here's some TDGs, and Don read it. And he goes, this is great, but what the hell are these things? This step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. You remember this, Don? When I showed you these, and you go, get rid of those steps. You're taking what we're trying to do and you're putting it back into a step. It's so ingrained in us in policing to teach a certain way of doing it that guys aren't really learning. I can remember going through, let's say, and I was a Marine first, a Marine grunt, going through a tactical police training thing where they're teaching you room entries and stuff, and passing the class and saying to myself, how do we know we did it right or wrong? Right? All we did is whatever the instructor told us, that was it. Right? And that's how we passed. But you left there thinking, I really don't know what the hell I just did here. I don't know why I passed it. I don't understand how that was effective versus ineffective. There was never talk about strengths of the tactic, weaknesses of it, why it's important to do it this way versus this way. There was none of that. You just got through, right?
Hey, Fred, you remember the great, after we published the Adaptive Police Handbook, how the SWAT guy contacted you and said they used our methods? And they were able to take down a guy without using force because they did it DDGs. It was a great comment that he sent us.
Yeah, it was great. And those guys still will call me from time to time, asking me about different issues and saying, hey, we did this and it works. And these tactical decision games are such a big thing. It's so powerful in police work, and slowly we're evolving. But so when I first started doing this back in the early 2000s, with policing, I'm trying to do it to make us better. It was controversial. Administration was like, what are you doing? You can't do that.
Fred told me stories every month about the resistance.
Oh my God.
From his chief.
Chief above and union members below. You're in the middle, right? Bouncing around both ways. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? Why are they not seeing it? They saw it like it was somehow it was going to be, and this goes back to the culture of this mission command, which is a good culture of a mission command is going to be built on trust, right? And not just the buzzword trust, but real trust. You got to build it. And what happens is there was such a distrust in organizations because of the risk aversion in the policies and procedures and the top down, do this and do that mentality. It's hard to break it out of guys. So what would take place is I'd end up spending back then. I had to spend 6 months arguing up and down the chain to be able to run tactical decision games in my police department that I worked for. Then once it got going, I ended up doing things like giving days off for the best, what we felt was the best course of action. Yep. All those things. But to the point that I got in trouble about a year later. They said, you can't just be giving days away. So, but anyway, there was a huge resistance. When I go to a class now and teach it, like next week, I'm going to be teaching a class. Monday morning, I'm going to go in there. Guys are going to be sitting in their chairs in a linear row, right? And they're going to be looking at us. And the first thing I do, right, is tell them, and I give them a brief instruction. Put this class and set it up conducive to good group learning, right? And they look at me with this dumbfounded look, like WTF, like, what the is this, right? What do you mean? What do you mean I got to get in a group, right? So then they get in the middle of it. I give them about a minute to do it. They get in the middle of it, and I have the Three Stooges on my phone. It goes off, the alarm, and I go, "Uh-oh, we're not done. We're not ready. Why?" Right? And it takes me a minute or two to get them to start talking. I said, "Why is it wrong?" "Well, you didn't really tell us what you were looking for." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We didn't give us clear instruction." I said, "So what you're telling me is my instructions were wrong. The leader's instructions, the mission and intent was off. Is that what you're saying? Okay, what do you need to know?" And we start from there. Now they put it into groups. I give them another 30 seconds. They get the thing set up, and we start having a conversation, right? Then we throw them right into, "Hey, everybody trained? Everybody developed in active shooter? Yeah, you got plans? Oh yeah." I said, "Okay, here's the next group exercise. Everybody, you've got all your planning. Everything's done. Just like we talked about, you know what to do. You've trained and developed for it. You go to the call, all goes bad. Why?" And I make them come up with reasons, a list of reasons why, and they have to explain them in a group setting. And then it begins. And then I throw them into different scenarios, but it could be something minor. It could be a legal thing, like Dawn talked about, the diplomatic thing. I use a car stop with drugs involved, and I leave a lot of the stuff from the actual case to develop the TDG, and I have them start going down the road about what they're going to do. It generates huge discussion. It's totally different than sitting there just reading a PowerPoint to somebody. And by the time
involved, it's peer-to-peer learning and student centric. It goes back to why you felt the way you did, Kevin, about this is criminal. It's the same with the police culture, police departments. Here's their answer to all these issues they're having between the Floyd issue, even though that was made horribly political. But the whole issue was police are not given scenarios that vary to simple to complexity and are involved in it, so they can develop adaptability. That's the criminal is we've got this thing that's both backed by science from the work of the Dr. Borks at UCLA and incredible military analysis that I've conducted, as well as Dr. Goodmanson and some others, Dr. Bruce Goodmanson at Quantico, that say, here is a better way to do it, but they're so addicted to this industrial age because it appears cheap, but in the end you have continually, I bet most of these things where you had a police mishap could have been prevented if we had been using the OBL methodology and versus the industrial mindset. That's the crime, Kevin. The science is there, it works. It's just a matter of changing it. It's not going to be that hard. Fred's doing it, some other guys. The Baltimore police, when I work with them, they love this stuff. You know what their biggest complaint was? Why didn't you do it earlier?
Yeah. I've had guys come up to me midweek and go like this. I'll never forget this guy. He comes up, he's a sergeant, and he comes up to me, goes, "Freddie, I owe you an apology." I go, "For what?" And he goes, "I came here with a bad attitude." And I go, "Why?" He said, "Some of my guys took this course down. It was other instructors took this course down another part of the state and said it sucked." And I said, "Why?" He said, "All they did is sit and listen to these guys read to me." He goes, "But you guys," he kept looking at me. I kept noticing looking at me like, "Hey, wait a minute, this is interesting." Right? That look on his face. But he came up to me, says, "This shit is great." They end up loving it. It's funny
too, Kevin. Everywhere the same AAR comment I got at Fort Hood and Davis Air Force Base recently, the same comments come out. One of them is, "This is not what we expected. We expect you you were a high named, credible guy. You were just going to talk to us." The second thing they say is, "This was fun." And Fred said this before you knew it was 3:00 in the afternoon, the class was almost done because we were so intense and we were part of it.
Yep. I work with another guy. He's a retired chief, Dick Wells. The guy he was a SWAT team commander for the local Metrolec team. here in the greater Boston area. And him and I started doing these together for the Municipal Police Training Committee, where we do these courses. And I teach with him 99% of the time. And he told me when we first, he goes, I had no idea how to do this. He goes, I love it. He loves it now. So now he sits in the back and he listens to, because we got mixed groups. We got city cops, we got young guys, old guys, we got guys from the forestry department. We got from all different walks of policing, different time as leaders, so on and so forth. So he sits back and listens, and he comes up with these different ideas that to focus and help develop scenarios that we might want to run these guys through throughout the week. So this is another thing that is hard to get across to these guys is, hey, what do you mean it's not the same? Well, we don't teach it the same every time because it might be a new scenario. We've been in class where somebody had a problem. We said, let's solve it as groups, and we throw guys into it, and they try to solve this real life problem in a community that happens to be in the class, and they end up coming up with great solutions to it that help these guys when they go back to the department.
That's the peer-to-peer learning. You have a classroom like Fred and I have had 20, 30 people. They have incredible backgrounds, even the young guys. They have ideals that teach me stuff, and we tend to leave them out totally. Right then, when you do it instructor-centric, it's all part of the AAR I sent you, Kevin, and Fred, that I wrote on 15 November. But my point is, here's a solution to these problems that we're talking about. The only cost would be development of the instructors, from instructors to facilitators. It's right there. It wouldn't take but a week for major departments to do this. And these guys would get so passionate, like Fred is about it, like Joe was about it, that you can start your revolution on how police are developed, because you're taking them from being very obedient to orders but not flexible or adaptive to being very adaptive and changing an order based they might get that they get to the scene and the situation's different. We do all that. We change. When I did the Garrett, my proudest moment, Fred and Kevin, was when I did the garrison at Fort Hood at the end of October for Chad. Chad Foster's another one I want to get on here, Kevin. He was the one that turned West Point around to this stuff. I'll get you hooked up. He's the garrison commander, just a great leader and a good friend. But Chad said, the most important thing about this, Don, was you did it with strategic leaders at Fort Hood, and they loved it. And they all said at the end, they were following me out, like you have happened, Fred. They followed me out to the car, and I had to get to do a briefing for the chief of staff of Third Corps for their People First Center. So I had to get out of there to be there on time. But they just wanted to talk about what they had learned and experienced and how they were going to use it in their directorates or their commands and everything. So this stuff works anywhere if it's done correctly. Yeah,
I would 100% agree with it. It's just we're stuck. I'm speaking for policing here. We're stuck in this mindset of doing it the way we've always done it in most places. And the shifting culture, leadership culture, mission command, right? Decentralized control for any cops that might be listening to this in the future. You got to develop it. You can't tell people and give them school solutions and expect them to change. They don't. We've taught them to be robots, to follow the rules. I see it all the time. If there's a domestic violence call, everybody pulls up out front, runs to the front door. They've been told a million times, and they'll tell me that they shouldn't do it. But in the real world, what do? They pull right up out front, and they all run. If one guy goes to the front door, 4 guys go to the front door. And
Fred, tell the story about catching one of your young policemen going fast. You were just taking a break or something in your car.
Oh yeah, I was taking a break. Yeah, I told him. He was a young rookie cop, and he was going blue lights and siren, 100 miles an hour everywhere. It got to a point that a veteran cop, which never happens, a veteran patrolman comes to me and he says, "Hey, you got to talk to this kid. He's all going 100 miles an hour everywhere." I go, "What do you mean? He's still doing it?" He says, "Yeah." He goes, "When you just called him to come see," I called him. I said, "Hey, I just need to talk to him about something simple." I said, "When you get a minute, come on in and see me. Get into the station and see me." Well, he flips his blue lights and siren on and goes flying across town to come see me, just to talk about whatever the hell it was. It was nothing major, right? So he tells me this. I said, "All right, I'll talk to him again." So I talked to him. I said, "Hey, boom. Slow down, knock off this foolishness. You got to slow. You got to be able to see what's going on. You can't just be pulling up out front. You're going to get hurt." long story short, I'm having a cup of coffee on a midnight to 8 shift, and all of a sudden I hear over the radio, all of us, we're having coffee, and he's out on the street, and we hear, help, I need help, right? So where are you? He tells us where he is. We pull up on Route 1, there's Jersey barriers in the road, and we pull up, and I look, and I go, where the hell's he out in the high-speed lane for? Well, he wasn't only out in the high-speed lane, his rear end of his car was up on top of the Jersey barrier. So I get out, I walk up to him. We all do, you all right? He says, yeah, and he's pacing. He goes, I screwed up, Lieutenant. I messed up, right? I said, what happened? And he tells me, right? He was driving down the road trying to find a spot to run radar. I said, how fast were you going? He said, I was probably speeding. Right. I said, okay. He says, and I stopped because I missed my spot, even just looking for a place to park his car. And I put him in reverse and backed up. And he went so fast, he turned into the barrier and wrecked the cruiser. So I looked at him and I said, it's my fault, not your fault. Right. And he says, well, what do you mean? I said, it's my fault. I said, when I yelled at you, I didn't mention traveling reverse. I only mentioned driving forward. I said, so it's my fault, right? So I ended up laughing, but nobody got hurt. But that's an example of it, right? Is everybody so linear in their thinking that even a guy out on the road doing his routine, right, which is what his routine was, right? They're always going to do it 900 miles an hour. There's this false sense of urgency in doing things that, and I say false sense because not everything's an emergency, all right? There's got to be a real sense, a real focused sense of urgency. Not just make everything, every time that somebody calls you on the radio, is it a blue lights and siren type call? But the way we teach guys, hurry up and get there, hurry up and get out, right? Solve the problem and leave. We're not teaching them to think. We're teaching them to get it done. And there's no thinking involved in a lot of these cases. Again, I'll say with few exceptions, it's just follow the rope procedure. We've done this before, do it the same way. Over and over and over again. I don't care. We label them domestics. We label them car stops. We label them robberies. We label them active shooters. And what is it? Every active shooter the same? Is every car stop the same? Is every domestic same? No. You got to be able to think. And we're not teaching. We're teaching them, if you got an active shooter, do this. If you got a robbery, do this.
We did active duty free play in the Baltimore Police. Great story, Kevin. I said, you guys, I had complete blanket develop a course for my sergeants. I told Commissioner Belfer, what's the background of your police department of 3,200 cops? He said, my 324 sergeants. Let's do the sergeants first. We did cohorts of 10 or 20. And one of the requirements was you guys need to find a place to do free play force on force. So the cops, getting innovative, found the maintenance center of Baltimore that had just been sold to a developer, but they had about a year and a half before they were going to develop it. Huge warehouses. They go in there and they put a call out to all the cops. We're developing this new training center. We'll only use it for a year and a half, but we're going to do this there. They had guys, they built fake row houses. They built up a car stop place. They set up a free play force on force coliseum, and they did active duty scenarios. But the key thing that they had never been exposed to, other than really doing free play, the police commissioner even got us sim munitions, 9mm Glock sim munitions and M4s. Beautiful. But they didn't know how to do an AAR. So we had to teach them how to do the AAR, which we cover in both the adopting mission command and the new OBL handbook. Facilitated I had Fred tell that story about that young cop, because Fred demonstrated an OBL approach to how he handled that policeman. Normally that guy got written up and would have been shamed or whatever and yelled at. The way Fred handled it is a great example how to lead and develop young people. And that's an OBL approach right there. I bet the guy went on later and became a really good cop because of that.
And he did. He took ownership because he said, all right, the lieutenant he took ownership of it because I told him, hey, it was my fault, right? And I was joking with him, but he remembers it. He'll talk. This is 20 years ago. He's a good cop. Every once in a while, he'll bring it up. He goes, remember that? I go, yeah. He goes, I never forgot that lesson, right? Because it was ownership. And I did that, and I taught my sergeants to do it. And this is what we teach when we teach sergeants in class. Now, hey, There's more to being a supervisor than finding faults in people. You've got to develop your guys. If you're not developing them, it's problematic. And that's another big thing that a mission command climate is going to take advantage of every opportunity to learn via the AAR, the after action reviews, which is big. But they got to do it. I tell guys, when you leave this class in 5 days, not only are you going to learn how to solve problems and do these things that you've taught yourselves for the week, you're going to have tools that you can go back and use to develop your people when you get back. Because in policing, we're so process driven that the only time we think we can train is when I send you to a class where you're away from the department. We get opportunities to train every day on this job. Every day we can take and do a quick AAI. They don't all have to be long, drawn out formal processes. They can be lessons from the call that you were on with your shift. And that's the kind of climate you want to get, where it's constantly learning and developing versus just, you went to a class, here's your certificate, put in your file, and the boss can go, look, I trained the guy. Look, it's right here. He went 5 years ago to active shooter training. He went 5 years ago to a decision-making class. And they think that's it. They think that's the end of it. It's much like we
had a young sergeant. Another thing that Commissioner Bilford, he retired in 2012, unfortunately, but we became good friends. He would call me or send me an email and said, Don, Sergeant so-and-so, this guy had been a former Force Recon sergeant in the Marine Corps and then got out, but he became a policeman. He was a sergeant. He would take his guys every Friday. They get training time. It's different periods. And he would do TDGs, and he invited the commissioner to come and watch it. And he said it was very powerful for his 8 or 9 guys on his shift, because they're like a squad leader for a shift. And he had that, and then you have 2 or 3 shifts with the lieutenant that's overall, that they're like their platoon leader. And he got more people got involved and started watching. It was very powerful. But they would do things that normally they would never talk about unless they did formal training every few months or every year. He was doing this stuff every Friday, and the guys were looking forward to it, where he was delegating to them to make up their own TEGs and bring them, and they were in charge of the session.
Yeah, when you do it,
start empowering and start developing people that way.
When you do it like that, Don, like you're talking about, the guys will. What happened with me over a period of time, it went from that resistance to guys saying, "Hey, can I develop one about this? Can I do one?" So they start to like it so much because they realize there's a value to it that they'll start doing them themselves. And that's when it really becomes powerful. Or you'll see guys on the street start to say, I'll never forget, one of the first ones I heard was from a young guy who got out of the academy. It's probably a couple of years on the job. And he said, they were going to a call of a potentially armed, like 18-year-old male threatening to commit suicide. And he says, over the radio, he says, hey, before we get there, he was a football player. He says, let's huddle at such and such intersection, right? So the guys met. I was there. We met up, and he said, hey, I think we should try this. They put a quick plan together, and off they went and handled it effectively. And so you start to see it develop, because guys like to get involved once they realize that, hey, this is good for us. All right. And it makes a difference. It makes us better at what we do. And like we used to do roll call trainings, we call them. We just at roll call, guys would develop it. Or if something, let's say there was an incident that came up, potentially dangerous one that always sticks out in my mind real quick is a cop from another town, lived in our town, was doing investigations in the military into gangs in the military. And there was a threat made. So what we did, me and the sergeant, I was a lieutenant at the time, the sergeant, I said, let's talk about it. So we threw it up on the map of the area, said, hey, here's what's going on. There's a potential threat. We don't know a whole lot about it, but here's where he lives. What will we do if we have a problem there? And we let the 4 or 5 guys working the shift come up with a solution, right? And then it took 10 minutes. And then I said, let's everybody go up and meet this guy, because I don't know him. Let's go make sure we meet the cop so we know who he is, right? And that's just a simple way of taking a problem and trying to come up with solutions to them, or at least ideas. Granted, you're going to have to adapt and adjust based on what unfolds, but now you're taking real world problems and you're getting guys to think about the potential response there. All right. And that stuff, its weight in keeping people safe and making them more effective what they do is so powerful, versus just saying there's a shooting at 123 Buckboard Drive, and that's it. We all go, and then we get there and try to figure it out. You know what I'm saying?
Fred and I's favorite day of the workshop, be it one day or I do 1 to 5 days, and 2 days is very popular because it's time limitations with the clients. But the entire second day, they go through all these problems. On the first day, I show them, I have them go through it, but they know how to facilitate these problems. Then the second day, their homework that night is to develop their own TDG that's related to what they do every day. Now that's I can speak for Fred because it's our favorite day, because they have to come in on the final day, regardless of what it is, and they have to present. Their groups do have to present and facilitate a TDG. They normally get an hour, like the Air Force. It took all day on Friday, and same with Fort Hood. But they got so much out of it, and we AAR each session on how they did. And I tell them, I have to at least get you introduced to this methodology by doing it. It's
he dropped. Oh,
that was
into it.
And what he's getting at is, you got to get them to understand how to do it. So when they go back, and I don't want to put Don's words in Don's mouth, but I've heard him talk about this enough. When they go back to their organizations, they have tools, because here we are bitching about what the organizations problems are, but the solution to it is doing it this way. Take it. Stop just think. We're so linear. You don't always have to send your guy to a class. You can roll out. Hey, if we get an active shooter here, how will we handle it? And maybe they went to the school, the active shooter school, a year ago. But you're keeping it ongoing. You're augmenting the training they got, instead of just putting a certificate in a folder and saying, "Yeah, look at this, we got it. It's right here." All right. Now he went, but these skills, these physical skills, can be very perishable. And if you're not deciding under pressure, in indirectly through training, how are you going to get good at it if you actually have it? And we make it sound like it's going to unfold like it does on paper, and it doesn't. I always remember Ulysses S. Grant in his memoirs. He wrote a piece. There was a piece in the book that stuck out. There's a bunch of pieces in his memoirs, but this piece stuck out. He was talking about the Battle of Shiloh, if I remember right. And he was talking about the opposing side's general or colonel, whatever it was. And he said his pen picture was perfect. But the real world, and he talked about how the real world was so much different than the way it's written. And that's a big thing in policing. We act like active shooters, stop the threat, render raid. Well, that sounds simple, right? And it is, in theory, it's simple. But now you got to wade through the calls. You got to find out who the bad guy is. Wade through the victims running, and in the chaos of everything, and the uncertainty that's going on, and not knowing where he is and exactly who he is. We make it sound like it's so simple on paper that somehow we get out of the car, it's going to be over, right? And then when we judge guys in the aftermath of it, we do it the same way. But my judgment of you, 20/20 hindsight, is totally different than what you knew in the real world in real time, right? We know everything in the aftermath. The officers responding didn't know any of it until it was unfolding. So we have to look at these problems for what they are. There's different types of problems that we deal with: technical versus adaptable. Some have a combination; they're hybrid. They got a combination of both, adaptive and technical issues. So we have to develop that culture of leadership, the mission command culture of trust. But I always like to, I put it in simple terms. You got to train your guys, trust them, and let them do their jobs, right? And then critique. It's not free reign. It's not laissez-faire. It's work. It takes work to do it when you develop it, and you have to be willing to study, learn, dedicate yourself to your people. Plain and simple. And if you do that,
totally makes sense. In fact, I'm writing my book now, Strength Through Chaos, and I've realized there are three major elements of chaos. That's limited information. People you got to understand, you will never be omniscient. There's always limited information. There's always friction and fog of war. There's that gap between reality and expectations. And if you're going to put people in the field, you have to accept that you don't know everything. There's so many variables out there that you just don't know. You have to have people on the ground to adapt. They have to. And if you don't train them and educate them to do that, you're putting them up for failure. So, so mission command really is essential.
It is. And when you talk chaos, how that internal friction that's created by, let's say, the rigid process-based training causes people they're thinking inward. They're thinking about, what am I supposed to do next? when if they're looking outward at the problem, they're going, here's what I need to do. There's a difference.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
difference.
It's almost like here are my constraints. This is what I can't do versus this is what I should be doing.
You got it. And I use the term afraid. They become risk averse. If you're risk averse at the top, worried about every step that somebody makes, your guys are going to be risk averse. They're going to be afraid because you're not going to have their backs. So they get nervous. What did they teach us to do here? What were they? Did they tell us how we're supposed to handle this? A quick example. I don't know how much time we got left. I've lost track of time. I love this stuff. But simple things for cops they learn in the academy: deadly hands. Right? Watch the hands when you approach, because that's what's got the gun, the knife, or the potential weapon. It can hit you with a fist. Watch hands. They did a study, Force Science Research, which is an organization that studies police force and other things. They did I believe it was their motor vehicle stop study they did, but part of it, they had actual sophisticated glasses on so they could track where the eyes were scanning and everything of cops. Long story short, right? Now, every cop you ask, what's one of the most important things on a multiple guest test that you can do when you're approaching cars? They'll all answer it right. Deadly hands. Watch for deadly hands. In the real world, in this training, 66% of the cops that went through it, 2/3, never even looked at the hands. Never even made it a point to look. They just locked on eyes. Why? We've been conditioned to look at eyes since we were babies, right? Look at me when I speak to you, mister. That kind of thing. We've been conditioned. Look somebody in the eye. So what we do is we tell them in the academy, watch deadly hands. They pass it on a test and we say, hey, you're all set. And that's a simple thing that we're not doing. You got to develop their skill sets. You got to teach them adaptability. One of the core competencies I strive for when I teach is this with leadership and sergeants and even patrol stuff that I do with the guys. Sense making, ability to size things up, look and observe, orient, decide, and act. The Boyd cycle. I see you're reading Boyd, the fighter pilot who changed the art of war. I saw it on one of your pages. The OODA loop. I'm telling you, man, that's a big piece of this. Is you're helping them to develop their observation, orientation, decision, and action cycles. So when you sense make, that's what it is. It's about your observations, using all your senses to size up a situation, right? Then you can frame it, your orientation, frame and solve the problem, right? With decisions and action. It's that simple. And then adaptability. Once I think I got a problem, an adaptive challenge, I think it's this, I start to handle it as this, and oh shit, it's that. Right. And what happens in policing, because of the linear process or the autocratic style of leadership, the centralized approach, is we keep going with the same stuff we started with. Right. If I started towards the front door, I keep going towards the front door, even though everything's screaming at me to shift and go to another location. And that's part of our problem is guys get stuck inward, right? Instead of processing information that's actually unfolding in front of them in real time. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. I got to tell you, Fred and Don, this has been another fantastic discussion. I feel like I've learned a lot. I feel like Fred, you just read a book to me, a brand new book. I've really taken in so much information, and I hope our brothers and sisters in law enforcement will get a lot out of this. So we're running close to our end time. What are any last words, Fred and Don, for the audience?
Don, you there? You want to go first?
Yeah, I just, everything Fred is right. Again, I'll repeat this and I apologize, but it's so key. The solution to how to fix a lot of these problems with policing or any high-end professional of first responders in the military is right in front of them. It's supported both by learning science and by detailed analysis of military history, particularly the way the Germans developed leaders to be adaptive in the late 1800s. It didn't begin in World War II, like some people say. It began in the 1800s. And so the solution has been developed. We just put out an adaptive outcomes-based learning handbook, which goes over the attributes, knowledge, and skills and how to develop those using OBL. That's a key aspect of the team and I put in there that was different from Adaptive Mission Command. The Adaptive Mission Command, your detailed, in-depth why, but the OBL handbook gives you a lot of stories on how to do this. And please let us know if you want us to do a workshop. And I do them virtual too, virtual now, virtual and live. So please contact me. That you'll have the email on your website. I'm easy to find, or let Fred know. But everything Fred talks, it's powerful and it works. That's the thing about it. It's not some Ivy League tower thing that Chad talked about when he first met me. He thought I was an Ivy Leaguer telling him how to do something that didn't work. He fell in love with it and he's never changed. All these guys do that. They love it. I got guys out there everywhere that love this stuff. He should meet Axe Foley too, Fred.
Oh God, yeah, Axe is. Yeah, he's the man. I mean,
he's another guy we can bring on here.
Oh,
okay.
Yes, he'd be great.
He's a retired Green Beret. Awesome guy. I love the guy like a brother. All these guys I do. Anyway, I'll close and let Fred finish it because Fred, you were extraordinary as always. You're just a great guy with a big heart and you're doing great things for the police.
Ron, you keep the passion alive, brother. You're always out here, and I'm always following you, man. You're true, not only a friend but a mentor to me. So, I've learned. I've learned a ton. But I'll leave it with this. It part of this mission command decentralized structure that we're talking about is getting leaders to recognize they're not only looking for problems, they're trying to prevent issues that cause them. Well, as a matter of fact, Dawn sent me this. It's from our book. It's a great quote. It says, "Positive leaders give the frontline broad authority, hence allowing initiative to be a driving factor behind solving problems. By continuously interacting with the environment, allowing a fast and fluid decision-making cycle on the front line. Information flows from the bottom up and influences the organization's strategic and operational elements in accordance with the overall commander's intent." That's the gist of it in a couple of sentences, right? Is train them, trust them, let them do their jobs. And I mean, I don't mean talk about it. I mean, do it. Do it. Talk has been going on. I get aggravated when I talk about talk because I've seen talk. Anybody can regurgitate information to you. You got to do what you say you're going to do. And like Dawn said, I say it's hard work because you got to change. It's not hard. You got to develop ideas. You got to develop scenarios, but you don't have to do it alone. Once you get guys to buy into this, so you influence them to see the value of it, they're all over it.
Yeah, they want to participate. Yeah, they love it.
They love it. They love it, man. It's that simple.
Fred Leland, thank you so much for participating in the Mission Command series. Again, thank you to Donald Vandegrift, the premier expert on Mission Command. You got to pick up his book, Adopting Mission Command. It is a gem. So with that, gentlemen, thank you so much. And I will see everyone later on. And again, for the audience, Fred's information will be on the bio. Here you'll see in the comments section. So will Don's. We'll have all this information available. If you want to contact them, leave them some comments, ask them some questions. I know they'd love to hear from you. So with that, thank you, gentlemen. Have a great day.
Welcome. Have a great weekend.
Awesome, guys. Enjoy.
If you like this content and want to hear other things like it, head on over to the website at blackmarketleadership.com. That's blackmarketleadership.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast, and you can even create a free members profile